Alright folks, so welcome back to the videos. Today we're going to be talking about different controllers. You guys been asking a lot of questions about simple controller, the module controller, and include controller and test fragment. So let's get to it. So for the simplicity, let's get rid of all these timers. Okay, so we have request 1. Let's just name this request as login, and let's just name this as registration. Okay, so we named first request as login and the second request as registration. So now what exactly we want to do. Okay, now let's include the controller that we want to do. For this specific example, let's get rid of, or let's just disable these two so that we don't have to worry about these. Okay, now the very first controller that we want to be talking about is the simple controller. Where is simple? Okay, so simple controller. So we have the simple controller. I'm going to drag it up there. Okay. The simple controller is nothing more than okay, so it's a collection of requests, no, collection of samples. So when I say collection of samplers, that means this specific controller can have one sample, that means one HTTP request, or one or multiple samplers, or multiple samplers can go in there. Okay, so let's just drag it in the simple controller. So now let's just name the simple controller as simple controller login. Okay, now let's just run it. It's gonna run in a pretty much same fashion the way our previous tests ran. So let's see how it works. So now you guys will see like there's not much of a difference here. Then there's a question that we might ask ourselves, like what exactly is the purpose of this controller? Yeah, that's a good question. So the reason that we have these controllers is there are multiple things that you can do with all these controllers, and one controller that specifically depends on all these controllers is module controller. Let's add that. Already. So now we have module controller here. Okay, so now you guys can see if I expand this, what exactly am I able to see? I'm not able to see my registration call. I'm not able to see my random variables. I'm not able to see anything, but I'm able to see all the controllers within this module controller. So what exactly this module controller does is it gives us ability to select any controller. It gives us ability to select any controller and run that controller from module controller. Okay. Okay, so that means when I selected the module controller, let me just select the simple controller login and save it. Okay, now let's just disable this simple controller. So now what exactly is going to happen? It is going to work pretty much the same way it worked the last time. The very first time the login is going to be called and the registration is going to be called. Even though we disabled it, that's how it is going to work, because we have selected the login here. Okay, so and I told you this login can be collection of requests, or it can be just one request in itself. Okay, let's run it and see. Now you guys can see it. Okay, so that means, so that is the whole purpose of module controller. Okay, so there is another one thing that we can try. Let's duplicate this request, and let's just say hypothetically, let's say that this is get materials API. So let's say we log in and we then get materials. We call get materials. Okay. So the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to show you that even though this simple controller can have multiple requests in it, and in this particular scenario, it will run both those requests. See, already. So multiple simple controller or any controller can have multiple controllers within itself as well. Okay, so there's another way we can do it instead of using the module controller. We can the same stuff or the same to call the same controllers multiple times. We can do it with test fragments as well. Before we go to test fragments, I want to mention that in case if we want to use the same module controller multiple places, we can do it. It eliminates us to write the same script over and over again. For example, like right now we have created one controller, and with the use of this module controller, now we can use this anywhere an n number of times. So in this case, it's going to call the simple controller first and then registration, and then it's going to call the simple controller again. Okay, now let's go to test fragments. Alrighty, so for test fragments, let's get rid of this module controller. Let's enable this, remove. Already, so the simple controller, it has collection of requests, right? So what we can do is we can save this as a test fragment. Let's just save it as a test fragment, and let's save it simple controller test fragment, test frag. Okay, so we're gonna save this. Okay, now you guys will be wondering, like, what's the purpose of saving it as a test fragment? Okay, the purpose, we want to solve the same purpose as what we did in the module controller. Let's say if we have created a script for any specific flow. For example, in this case, we have created a script for login and getting the materials, correct? And we do not want to use the same code over and over again. So another way is the test fragment. So how we can do it with test fragment? Let's implement the test fragment. I'm sorry, we have to include the include controller. Alrighty, so we have include controller here. Now you guys will see, like over here, it's looking for a file name. Over here, we're gonna give the fragments file name. This is this. So now we have this. Let's save it. So what it's gonna do is this include controller has the simple controllers requests in it. Okay, so internally, this is calling the simple controller. Okay. So now let's call it one more time. Now you can see the login is being called, then get materials, and then registration is being called. Okay. There's one more thing that we can do that, for example, in the previous cases in the module controller, we did have to keep the simple controller here in this test, in the same test plan. But even if we remove this test plan now, or that specific controller now, since we have included the controller, the same controller, it really doesn't matter if we really need that controller here or not. Okay, so even now the results are going to be same. It's going to call the simple controller and then it's going to call registration. So login, this, and then registration. Okay, so the next controller that we're going to be talking about is Interleave controller. Let's add Interleave controller. Interleave controller. Okay, let's put it up there. Let's disable this, and let's duplicate this. Let's duplicate these two again. Let's just hypothetically say the very first call is call 1. The second one is call 2. The third one is call 3. And fourth one is call 4. Okay. So you guys really have to listen carefully now. Okay, now I'm gonna put call 3 and call 4 in Interleave controller. Okay, now Interleave controller has 2 calls in it. So what Interleave controller does is, for example, if there is one user and it is the very first call is going to do call 1, it is going to do call 2, then then it is going to go in Interleave controller, and then it will do call 3 and will leave call 4. Okay, and then go forward with the rest of the requests if there are any. Okay, this is gonna be, that is the reason it is called interleave. It leaves, it iterates. Okay, so for example, let's say if we have 2 loops. Okay, so let's say if one user is doing 2 loops, so what it is going to do in the very first loop, it is going to call 1, call 2, it's going to call 3, and then it's going to come out of this controller and go with the rest of the requests. But in the second loop, what it's going to do is call 1, call 2, and going to do call 4. Okay, so it leaves one call, but the sequence that it leaves one call is sequential. Okay, so let's do it. Let's run it. But before we run it, let's just have 2 loops. And now let's run it. Okay, now you guys can see call 1, call 2, call 3, then call 1, call 2, call 4. So in the very first call, in the very first loop, it left 4. In the second loop, it left 3. Similarly, there is another controller that is called random controller. So you guys got the gist of it. I'm not gonna go over random controller. Random controllers pretty much like it is self-explanatory. Like if this controller has multiple requests in it, the program will randomly pick any request and run it, and will leave rest of the requests and come out of it. Okay, so this will do for this video. Please like and subscribe.